For decades, a quiet, deadly conflict has been shaping the Middle East. You've probably heard the term shadow war. It's a conflict fought with spies, with sabotage, with proxy armies, always just bubbling below the surface of an all-out war. But recently, that long, simmering shadow war between Israel and Iran, it just exploded into the open. So today, we're going to break down how we got to this point and what it all means for the future. Okay, so to really get our heads around this, here's the game plan. We'll start with the recent events that literally push this fight out of the shadows. Then we're going to map out the battlefront so you can see the true scale of this thing. We'll also hit rewind and go back 40 years to understand the history here, dig into the absolute heart of the conflict, the nuclear issue, and finally, we'll look ahead at what is a very, very uncertain future.
So how does a rivalry that's been simmering for decades suddenly boil over? Well, it started not just with weapons, but with words and images, carefully designed to send a crystal-clear message. Imagine seeing this, a massive mural right in the middle of Tehran. And that warning, you start, we finish it, wasn't just in English, it was also in Hebrew. I mean, that's about as direct a message as you can send to the people of Israel. This wasn't just empty rhetoric, this was a calculated move, a piece of psychological warfare that signaled, hey, the old subtle rules, they're out the window. And this wasn't some vague threat either. The mural had a detailed map of Tel Aviv, pointing out specific spots as potential targets. The message from Iran was unmistakable. We know exactly where to hit you. It was a projection of strength, a way to deter an Israeli attack, while also getting their own people ready for what might come next.
So all these signals, all these threats, they weren't just for show. It all led to something that had never happened before, a direct military fight between the two countries. The tension finally snapped, and it turned into a 12-day war. And this was a massive shift. For decades, this fight was all covert ops and proxies. Now it was state against state, out in the open.
So just how big was this thing? The fighting wasn't just between Israel and Iran. As you're about to see, this was a full-blown regional conflict playing out across multiple fronts.
Okay, get ready for this number because it is absolutely staggering. In just the 20 months leading up to and including that direct war, Israel launched nearly 35,000 attacks. And these weren't just on its borders. We're talking about operations across the Palestinian territories, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and even inside Iran itself.
And this chart really breaks it down for us. You can see the vast majority of those attacks were in the Palestinian territories and Lebanon, which makes sense given the ongoing fights with Hamas and Hezbollah. But look at Syria. That's a pretty significant number. It really shows Israel's long-running campaign to stop Iran from shipping weapons to its allies. Now, when the war broke out into the open, it was a very different fight for each side. Israel, with its high-tech air force, hit over 150 locations inside Iran with about 360 strikes. Iran, on the other hand, relied on its huge missile arsenal, launching over 500 missiles at Israel. But as this table shows, the human cost was also incredibly uneven, with far more civilian deaths in Iran. It's just a stark reminder that even in so-called precision warfare, ordinary people pay the highest price.
The tactics were different, but the bad blood behind them goes way back. To really understand this open war, we have to travel back more than 40 years to where this whole rivalry began.
It all really kicked off in 1979 with Iran's Islamic Revolution. The new government basically declared Israel an enemy, an extension of American power in the Middle East, and that ideology quickly turned into action. By '82, Iran was helping create Hezbollah in Lebanon. In the '90s, it started backing Hamas. It all became part of their official strategy, forward defense, basically fight your enemies far away so you don't have to fight them at home.
And their main tool for this strategy was what they called the axis of resistance. Look, Iran's regular army can't really go head-to-head with its rivals, so instead they built this incredible network of proxy groups. It gave them a way to fight back, to project power, and to create this sort of ring of fire around Israel, all without having to get into a direct fight. Now, this was not a one-way street, not by a long shot. Israel waged its own shadow war right back. We're talking about incredibly sophisticated cyber attacks that took down infrastructure, sabotage of key facilities, even the targeted assassinations of nuclear scientists. And all of it, every single covert op, was aimed at one thing: slowing down what Israel sees as the ultimate threat, Iran getting a nuclear bomb. And that brings us to the absolute core of this whole conflict. For decades, the main reason for this shadow war, the thing driving everything, has been Israel's ironclad determination to stop Iran from ever building a nuclear weapon. So in 2015, the world tried to fix this with diplomacy. The result was the Iran nuclear deal.
For the US and its partners, it seemed like a major win. It put verifiable limits on Iran's program and kept them at least a year away from a bomb. But for Israel, it was a disaster. They argued the deal's limits would eventually expire and that lifting sanctions would just give Iran a ton of cash to fund its proxy armies across the region.
And well, when the US pulled out of that deal in 2018, things escalated fast. Iran, no longer feeling bound by the rules, hit the accelerator on its nuclear program. They started enriching uranium all the way up to 60% purity. Now, there's no real civilian use for that. It is just a tiny technical step away from weapons-grade material. That red line was getting awfully close.
So, after a direct war and 40 years of covert conflict, where on earth does this leave the Middle East? It feels like the old rulebook has been completely torn up, and now the entire region is staring into a period of massive uncertainty.
And one thing is absolutely clear. The October 7th attack changed everything for Israeli strategy. For years, the policy was basically to mow the grass, contain threats with limited strikes now and then. But that's been replaced with a much more aggressive, proactive approach aimed at destroying threats before they can even grow.
So the fighting may have paused for now, but the ceasefire feels incredibly fragile, and it leaves these huge critical questions just hanging in the air. For Iran, after being hit directly, do they now think a nuclear bomb is the only real way to stay safe? And what about their axis of resistance? Did it not work as well as they'd hoped? And of course, the biggest question of all, can diplomacy put this back in the box, or are we just waiting for round two?
Which leaves us with this one final thought. For 40 years, this was a conflict fought in the shadows. But after direct missile strikes and open warfare, you have to ask, has the shadow war finally ended, only to be replaced by a new and frankly far more dangerous open confrontation?